Welcome back to the channel. This is Maxwell Lumumba Africa, and today I'm going to talk about Dimango exposes Mosabi'S past. Was he being exploited? Ladies and gentlemen, for those who have not subscribed to this amazing YouTube channel, make sure that you subscribe, like, comment and share this video to other individuals. Remember to turn on the notification bell so that any day, anytime I post any video, you people get notified. Watch my videos from the beginning up to the end without skipping those ads. Let us show love to this YouTube channel. Let us like all my videos. Ladies and gentlemen, Dimango did a live stream of which she exposed how Mosabi used to work in different homesteads, and at the end result, he was being manipulated, and that is the reality about the whole situation. Let us hear what Dimango is saying, then we dive deep to the entire discussion. Stay tuned.
Mosabi, sasa sijui nipe watu chai yako ama ninyamaze tu.
Dimango start by saying, Mosabi, should I give people your cup of tea or should I remain silent?
Mosabi! Mosabi. Lakini watu hubadilika. Guys, watu hubadilika.
Should I even translate the laughing? I don't need to do that. So, she goes ahead and says, people really change.
Niwape chai mkunywe hadi mulale.
Should I give you a cup of tea you drink until you sleep?
Sijui niwape chai ya huyu mtu mwenye anaitwa Mosabi. But I don't know. The truth is, hata kama alibadilika, like, I don't know, kuna tu watu huwezi wachukia. Like, you know, kuna watu tu, you just laugh at them.
Dimango submits, even though Mosabi changed, but for her, she cannot hate Mosabi.
Oh, Mosabi, hey. Sacha niwape chai. Mosabi alikuwa anafanya kazi uko kwetu.
Let me give us a cup of tea. Mosabi used to work in our homestead.
Alikuwa kijana mzuri. Na mimi nilikuwa tu nampenda tu juu alikuwa kijana, you know, anafanya tu kazi yake, alafu, you know, kujituma.
Mosabi was a very good and hard-working individual. The reason why I really liked Mosabi is because Mosabi was much obligated to his work and how he does things.
Alikuwa kijana mzuri, so mimi hata saa zingine nilikuanga tu nampea tu tips hapa pale. Kama siku za birthday yake namwambia hebu tuma namba, alafu na okay.
He was a very good boy. Sometimes during his birthday, I used to call him to give him tips, maybe to motivate him, sending him something small to encourage him, yeah?
Funika mali. Aya, wacha nifunike mali. Thank you. Yeah?
A viewer is telling Dimango to funika mali means to cover yourself. So that means maybe Dimango was exposing some boobs, I don't know, boobs or nipples, were trying to beep somewhere. So Dimango, she's being told to dress up properly. So that means she was misbehaving, yeah?
So nilikuwa nasema like alikuwa tu kijana mzuri tu sana. So siku zingine hata nilikuwa namwambia leta namba ya M-Pesa nikuwekea kitu.
Sometimes I used to ask him, bring your M-Pesa number so that I can give you something small as an appreciation.
Juu alikuwa tu anapenda kazi yake, alafu hana mambo and all that. Like,
he was much obligated to his own duties and he never had a lot of things.
Like, ningesema like ni mtu mwenye like hatukuwahi kuwa na shida na yeye hata siku moja.
He is somebody that we never had problems with him, even maybe once. We never had issues with Mosabi.
alikuwa anajituma sana. Alafu kitu ilikuwa inanifurahisha ni vile alikuwa anakimbia, like akienda kufanya kitu ni mbio mpaka anasema tu Mosabi, mbona utaanguka?
One thing that motivates me a lot is when Mosabi was called upon to do some tasks. He used to run. Even sometimes I was like asking myself that, hey, Mosabi, one day he'll be running this way, then he sleeps and falls down. Yeah.
Alafu siku moja tu akaamka asubuhi akakuwa tu mtu mwingine mwenye sijaiona.
One day Mosabi woke up and became a very different person. Mosabi changed. Yani hata siamini. Kwa hivyo binadamu wanaweza kuwa wazuri kesho, alafu kesho kuta uamke wamekuchukia. He says, I can't believe human beings today, they can be very good, but tomorrow they become somebody else. Sometimes they go ahead and maybe become very, very, it is like jealousy with somebody. That is the nature of human being.
Wanasema vile we ni mbaya, vile watasema vitu zote mbaya, lakini hawatawahi sema vitu poa zenye mshai wafanyia.
Once people change, they speak everything bad that you people have been doing to them, but they don't see the positive part, or they don't tell us that the good things that these people have done to us. So that is like now ridiculing or criticizing Mosabi.
Yeah? Mi hata hakuwa ananifanyia kazi. But alikuwa anafanya kwetu. Na alikuwa kijana mzuri, like hakuwa na shida, hakuwa na shida, like siwezi sema alikuwa na shida yote.
Mosabi was not working for me, but for me, I really think he was a good individual. He was hard-working individual. I never saw any issues with him.
But siku moja tu aliamka. Nikasema wow. Binadamu kweli, uwaone tu, uwaache tu vile wako.
One day you wake up and see about human being. Just leave human being the way they are, because sometimes they don't even appreciate.
But nikasema ni sawa tu, kwa sababu you can't pretend forever. Yeah, for sure. But hata mimi nilikuwa shocked juu mimi sikuwa expect.
She goes ahead and says for her she was very shocked, but she knows that you never pretend forever. Even though she was shocked, she had to agree with what has happened.
Juu personally nilikuwa tu nampenda tu vile ako anafanya kazi yake, hana mambo mingi, like anajituma hapa pale.
I used to love Mosabi because of how he could do his thing, on how he was much obligated to the task and duties that he was doing. Today's video, I'm doing it from Isinya. For those who really understand Kajiado County, we have beautiful animals over here. For those who want to watch the entire video in my YouTube channel, just go visit Vibe with Lumumba YouTube channel. You can see how these beautiful animals survive in a drought condition. So for those who really understand when it comes to, guys, I want us to have a very serious conversation about what Mwango has said about Mosabi's past. And let me make something very clear from the beginning. I'm not reacting to Mwango's account of what happened. I was not there. I did not personally witness Mosabi working in those homesteads, and therefore I'm not going to present every allegation as the established fact. But if what Mwango said and describes it as accurate, then there are some very serious questions that need to be asked. Because when somebody tells us that a young man was employed by one person but was also routinely sent to work in another homestead, and that he was doing domestic chores such as washing underwears and socks, we cannot simply dismiss that conversation by saying, but he was happy. That is where I have a problem with, because whether somebody smiles, whether somebody runs when sent, whether somebody says they love their work, those things alone does not determine whether the working arrangement was that fair. And today, I want us to break this down very careful. Was Mosabi simply a hard-working young man who loved his job? Or was he being taken advantage of because people around him had become accustomed to his availability and obedience? And perhaps the biggest question of all, when Mosabi finally changed, was he actually becoming disrespectful, or was he actually becoming independent? Let us talk about that, because for those who know the history about Mosabi, even before Mosabi went to JT podcast, the history tells us a lot. People really understand what happened. That is why I don't want to repeat what happened with him. So let me start by saying this. Mosabi had no problem with us. But what does that really mean? What Mwango herself said. So she goes ahead and describes how he would run whenever he went, or where he was sent, or when he was sent somewhere. Now, I understand why somebody would look like that and say, this man was happy, he enjoyed working, so what is the problem? But hold on, there is difference between being willing to work and being treated fairly at work. A person can be hardworking and still be exploited, of which that was something that was happening with Mosabi. A person can be very loyal and still be underpaid, and that is very evident because Mosabi used to work for Gitiriba. Gitiriba was the employer of Mosabi, but still Mosabi could go and work in the villa. Mosabi could go and work in actually a census family. So that tells us that a person can be very grateful and still deserve better condition, and a person can love the people around him while still eventually realizing that he wants something, or something that's different for his life. So when Mwango comes and says Mosabi had no issues, my question is, was Mosabi actually given the freedom to question the arrangement? Because sometimes people are so much economically dependent on others who don't complain, not necessarily because everything is perfect. Sometimes they simply don't see another option, and that is why I don't think the argument that Mosabi never complained should automatically end today's discussion. And let me bring something about the two homestead question, and we have to go and say the part and the part that really caught my attention. According to Mwango, Gitiriba was Mosabi's employer, but Mosabi also worked at their homestead, and according to the account, Gitiriba is the neighbor who employed Mosabi. So here's my question: what exactly was the employment arrangement? If Gitiriba employed Mosabi, was Mosabi's job only to Mosabi's job was only to work for Gitiriba, or was there an understanding that he would also work for another homestead minus being given a pay? And if he was working in another homestead, who was paying him for that additional work? Because this is where the issue becomes complicated. Imagine somebody hires you to work for them. Then instead of working exclusively for your employer, you are repeatedly sent somewhere else to perform duties, if that additional work is not properly compensated, then we have to ask whether that arrangement was fair or not. I'm not saying that I know exactly what happened. I am saying that the explanation itself raises questions, and those questions deserves answers. And another serious allegation that was there was washing underwear and socks. Why these matter? I know a lot of people will be asking that. When D talks about everything about Mosabi, I don't know, there is a time that Mosabi, I don't know, changed from maybe being somebody who's very serious to this kind of individual. Yeah, do you know Mosabi was being exploited? Mosabi used to wash clothes, not inherently degraded. Let us be fair. There is absolutely nothing wrong with the doing household chores as part of legitimate employment. The issue is not the underwear. The issue is the overall arrangement surrounding the work. Was Mosabi properly employed? Was he properly paid? Did he have reasonable working hours? Did he have the freedom to say no? Was he being sent from one household to another because people had started seeing him as a person who would simply do whatever the E is asked to do? Those are questions, because if somebody is employed as domestic worker, household chores can obviously be part of the job. But if a person is technically employed by one individual and regularly doing underpaid work for another household, that's where the situation deserves closer examination. And this is why I think Mwango on explanation actually opens a bigger conversation than what she may have intended. Another thing that Mwango says is about he used to run whenever he sent. And this one, we have to look at it very deeply. She remembers this as something that made her very happy. But I want us to look from another perspective. Why was he always running? Was he excited to serve them? Was he simply extremely hardworking, of which I think that the reason was he young and eager to please? That is something that somebody can ask. Or had he learned that whenever somebody called him, he was expected to respond immediately? We cannot know from the statement alone, but this is where the context matters, because obedience can look like happiness from the outside. A person can smile while working. A person can run when called. A person can say yes to everything, but that does not automatically tell us that whether they have genuine freedom. And this is why I will not use Mosabi's former behavior as evidence that everything was necessarily perfect with him. Look at, sometimes these things happen with a reason, and I'll be telling us that, the morning Mosabi changed. That is what Mwango said. She says that one morning Mosabi woke up and became somebody else. According to her, his behavior changed abruptly. And she says she doesn't understand how human being can be good today and then become something completely different. But let me challenge that idea. Maybe Mosabi didn't suddenly become a different human being. Maybe people around him simply started seeing a different side of him. Maybe he grew, maybe he gained confidence, maybe he started thinking about his future, maybe something talked to him, or maybe he realized that he could do more with his life. Maybe he became very tired. Maybe he's simply reaching a point where he said, I don't want to live like this forever. And that does not necessarily make him a bad person. This reminds me When Mosabi left, a lot of people were saying that Mosabi is ungrateful. I don't know Mosabi is what. Right now, as we are speaking, Mosabi has a place that he can call, this is my home. Mosabi can do whatever he wants to do. At least he has made some progress when it comes to life. So in fact, sometimes personal growth looks like rebellion to people who benefited from the old version of you. Think about that. When someone is already always available, always obedient, and always saying yes, everybody loves them. But the moment that person starts saying no, suddenly they have changed. Suddenly they are disrespectful. Suddenly they are ungrateful. Suddenly they have become a bad person. But maybe they haven't become bad. Maybe they have simply discovered boundaries. Let me just pick this call, then we proceed. Dimango goes ahead and says he forgot all the good things we did for him. So when she says that, this is another part that I want to challenge. If somebody helped you in the past, should you forever remain indebted to them? This is the same mistake that we came to realize about Clarice, yeah? Because somebody is calling you ungrateful, that you don't want to see where you came from, and this individual has been exploiting you extensively. So if somebody helped you, do you have any reasons to remain there glued without focusing on yourself? I don't think so. If I help you today, that does not mean I owe you in future. If I give you food today, that does not mean that I owe you labor. If I give you clothes today, that does not mean you owe me your entire life. And if I employ you today, of which I know me myself have employed a lot of people, that does not mean that you are permanently obligated to Maxwell Lumumba to remain my employee. Gratitude is very important. Respect is also very important. But gratitude should never become a lifetime contract. And this is why I think Mosabi's decision to move forward with his life deserves to be looked at from both sides. Maybe he was genuinely ungrateful, of which I think that is a possibility, but of which me as Maxwell Lumumba, I'm here saying that is not the reality. But maybe he simply wanted independence, and those two things are not the same. The biggest question is, who benefited from Mosabi's labor? And we have to talk about that uncomfortable question. Who was benefiting from Mosabi's labor? One of the individuals was Mwango, because you tell us that you were sending Mosabi, he was running. The second person is your brother, working in the homestead. Because we are talking about exploitation, that's ultimately what we need to examine. Was Mosabi working reasonable hours for reasonable concept, what we call compensation? Was he employer receiving the benefit of work? Was other people, because there is somewhere, when you follow about this story, about 7,000, 14,000, yeah, this means there is somewhere, somehow, Gitiriba'S was receiving the benefit of Mosabi's work. Were other people also benefiting from his labor? And was everybody receiving their fair share? If the answer is that Mosabi was routinely working for multiple households but being compensated as though he worked for only one, then I think that deserves serious criticism. That is why I know how to criticize people, because that is not about whether was Mosabi smiling. That was not about whether he ran when sent. It is about fairness, and if the arrangement was unfair, then we should not romanticize It's simply because Mosabi appeared happy at that time. But let us also be fair to the family. And I want us to say this because Dimango was given her side of the story. She clearly believes that Mosabi was treated well and that he changed unexpectedly. And if she said the family supported him, helped him and treated him well, those claims should also be considered. We should not accuse people of exploitation without evidence. That is why I keep saying, if Mwango's account is accurate, then there is serious question about the working arrangement. But we also need Mosabi's perspective 100%. How much was he being paid? What exactly happened? What work was he contracted to do? Who authorized his work to a different homestead? Was he comfortable with the arrangement? And why did he eventually decide to leave? Those answers will never be complete pictures. And my biggest problem with the story is this: the idea that because Mosabi was once happy working for them, he should have remained that way forever. That is no. Human beings grow, people change, people discover themselves, people get new opportunities, people become with development ambitions, and sometimes people you knew 5 years ago is not the same person you meet today. That's life. If Mosabi woke up one morning and decided, I want to be independent, I would want to build my own life, I want to do something different, then there is nothing wrong with that. The problem would only come if he deliberately lied, stole, harmed person, or betrayed people who genuinely help him. But simply wanting independence, that's not betrayal. So my conclusion is very simple. Dimango's story raises more questions than it answers. If Mosabi was employed by Gitiriba but also worked routinely in another homestead, we need to understand exactly how that arrangement worked. If he was doing additional work without compensation, then that raises serious legitimate questions and concerns about exploitation. Let us not be exploited because people perceive us and they want to continue exploiting us because they have seen good part of our let's say about us. So if he was fairly compensated and willingly agreed to everything, then that is completely different story. And that is why I shouldn't simply look at Mosabi running around and say he was happy, so there was no problem. Happiness is not a payslip. A smile is not an employment contract. A gratitude is not an ownership. When you look at a dog, when you have been beating, when you beat a dog maybe severally, once the dog sees you, it runs. Maybe that is the reason why Mosabi was running. Yeah, we cannot acknowledge the possibility that person or people helped him while also acknowledging that he had the right to move on, because at the end of the day, no human being should be expected to work for somebody for the rest of their life simply because that person once gave them an opportunity. That person, maybe you gave that individual money to celebrate the birthday. If Mosabi wanted independence, growth, and a different future, that was his rights. The real question is not simply why did Mosabi change. The real question is what happened in Mosabi's life that made him decide how long he wanted to live the way he had been living. How many years has Mosabi spent in that territory with no progress? A lot of years. And until we hear his side of that story, I think there is a very important part of this conversation that is still missing. What do you think? Was Mosabi genuinely being exploited, or was this simply a normal working arrangement that later went bad? Let me know in the comment section and let us know and share ideas on how to prosper furtherness. Stay tuned. Goodbye for now. Let us stay tuned. Goodbye.